Hello, this is the Free Market Society podcast. I'm here, or my name is Michael Anderson. I'm here with Justin Lee
Hey, how's it going?
and Stephanie Anderson.
Hi, sorry I'm eating.
And today we are going to talk about a few things related to free markets and libertarianism and capitalism.
Sounds good. Um, and I know recently in the headlines, probably just big as the Google controversy of them firing their employees. So I think we are going to discuss that today.
Yeah, that sounds like a great topic. So, let's see. To update all of our viewers that might not be up to date on this, Google recently fired one of their engineers. His name is James Damore, and
Hmm.
they fired him for uh, what did they say the phrase was? Reinforcing gender stereotypes, I think, was the reason for termination that was listed. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so what happened was about 2 months ago, James Damore said that he had been in a meeting for diversity training at Google, and he thought, I wonder if diversity training actually helps uh, to correct sexism and racism, and I wonder if it's what's good for the company as a whole and good for the minorities and women in particular. And so he decided to do some research on the subject, and about a month after he had these thoughts, he wrote a 10-page article on why he thinks that Google's methods to attempt to reduce sexism and racism are not only unproductive but counterproductive to Google's um, ability to have a good workforce that is productive and produces good products. Is that basically how you understand it?
Yeah. I also listen because there's this YouTube Stefan Molyneux. I know a lot of people don't like that guy, but he did an interview with James Damore, and it's essentially how he explained it. I also have the his original document that he report he made in front of me right now too. So
I also have that with me. I watched um, I watched Jordan Peterson's interview.
oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch that. But interestingly enough, what from media seemed to really vilify him, just make him seem like a misogynistic, just sexist jerk. But when you read his report, it's very reasonable, very rational, and even in his report, he does say he's not a conservative or libertarian or a liberal. He considers himself more of a classic liberal or a libertarian. And I mean, his reasons, I don't see anything very sexist about them. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
there is,
I have
yeah,
an excerpt pulled up that I saw on Twitter the other day, and it's like, I hope you don't mind if I read it. It is very reasonable and very logical and not sexist at all. It says, quote, I hope it's clear that I'm not saying diversity is bad, that Google or society is 100% fair, or that we shouldn't try to correct it or that minorities have the same experience of those in the majority. My larger point is that we have an intolerance for ideas and evidence that don't fit a certain ideology. I'm also not saying that we should restrict people to certain gender roles. I'm advocating for quite the opposite. Treat people as individuals, not just as another member of their group, like tribalism. End quote.
yeah. I mean, I see it as very reasonable. I think news media websites they took parts of it, cut out the parts that made him sound reasonable, and just kind of took snippets and try to really frame him in a bad light. Which is, I mean, I'm not surprised this is done all the time now, but it just seems ridiculous that someone has to go through that for simply putting out an opinion and asking for a more open discussion. Let's not just stay in our echo chamber at Google here, but let's talk about opposing viewpoints, maybe just to improve the situation of the workplace. And Google proves exactly what he puts in his article about the echo chamber and fire him for putting a dissenting view, which is just ironic to me. But
Yeah, I think that whatever um, whatever Google's intentions were with handling this document, by firing him, they certainly add credibility to his claim. I mean, when he
I,
says that Google has a, let's see if we can find the exact quote. He says something to the effect of that Google has, uh,
An agenda.
well, that not necessarily that Google has an agenda, but that Google discourages people from sharing contrary. Here's it says it's in the section "Why We're Blind" on page 7 of his document. It says we all have biases and use motivated reasoning to dismiss ideas that run counter to our internal values. Just as some on the right deny science that runs counter to the God is greater than humans is greater than the environment hierarchy, the left tends to deny science concerning biological differences between people. Thankfully, climate scientists and evolutionary biologists generally aren't on the right. Unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of humanities and social science. Okay, so that's kind of the start of the segment where he says that
yeah, just
as with many things in life, gender differences are often a case of grass being greener on the other side. Unfortunately, Google money is being spent to water only one side of the lawn. The
yeah,
same,
yeah,
yeah, and so here it is. In his suggestions at the conclusion of the paper, page 8, it says, my concrete suggestions are to, and one of the bullet points is, stop alienating conservatives. Viewpoint diversity is arguably the most important type of diversity, and political orientation is one of the more fundamental and significant ways in which people view things differently. In highly progressive environments, conservatives are a minority that feel like they need to stay in the closet to avoid open hostility. We should empower those with different ideologies to be able to express themselves. Alienating conservatives is both non-inclusive and generally bad business because conservatives tend to be higher in conscientiousness, which is required for much of the drudgery and maintenance work characteristic of a mature company. So, actually, his whole paper seems to borrow a lot from Jordan Peterson's research on the 5 different dimensions of personality. They're neuroticism,
yeah,
agreeableness, conscientiousness, whatever all of them are. But having listened to some of Jordan Peterson's videos, the mentioning on page 2 or 3 of neuroticism, sorry, page 4 on neuroticism, and the mentioning at the end about conscientiousness, these are all they all seem to line up with Jordan Peterson's research on personality traits and tendencies.
yeah, and it is a pretty well thought out and researched. I mean, there's links and stuff, and he cites his source, and it's surprising because liberals always claim to, they love like science. If it's based on science, then it has to be real. But when things are based on science that oppose their view, then they seem to be they give a lot of flack to those people. So, and I don't even see it as a negative document. I don't see anything he's saying that's inherently sexist or misogynistic.
No, and part of it is so part of his suggestions are on ways to reduce the gender gap in STEM fields. And he says, here are some suggestions on how to get more women into STEM fields, and says, since women on average show more interest in people than men do, and men show more interest in things than, sorry, women on average show a higher interest in people and men in things, is his statement. And then he says, because of this, what we can do is create what he calls pair programming teams. And so like, that sounds like a pretty good suggestion. Is like, on average, women are more interested in people, so they don't go into programming because if you're interested in people, a job where you're staying up all night, sitting in front of a screen and not talking to people doesn't sound particularly interesting. So
Right.
redesigning the job so that you have two people programming the same thing, working in tandem, you get more people interactions in programming, and then you get people that are interested in people being not as turned off by the aspect of programming. Um,
Right. Right.
and it says women on average are more prone to anxiety, so make tech jobs and leadership jobs less stressful by having stress reduction courses and more work-life balance. And it says that part of why more men go into the tech field, he says, is because the male gender role is inflexible. That because men are judged on their ability to generate wealth, men feel compelled to find jobs that they may not like but will generate wealth. And so they go into tech and leadership jobs not because they like it, but just because of the money. And women who end up in these jobs typically go in because they like it, rather than just, I hate my life for 40 hours a week, but I need money.
Yeah, and I think that's just I think psychologically or just evolutionary, it's just kind of a innate difference between the genders, the biological differences between male and female. But um, and yeah, as you said, I don't. He's not even saying that women are not as intelligent or they're not as good at a certain job. But if Google wants to improve its workplace environment, they need to implement ways where women can contribute what they're known to be good at and are good at, and as well as men too. But yeah,
Yeah. So I think that the three of us are of the opinion that the paper is not sexist and it is not
no, not at all.
pseudoscientific.
I don't see anything. I don't see any made up conjectures in there, and it seems to be all very well written and thought out. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Why is I mean, the right has its own problems. Why is the left gone so crazy as of late?
I don't think it's as of late. I think that this is a reaction to, um, I think this is a reaction to the McCarthy trials, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what happened was, I think prior to McCarthyism, like most of the traits that we typically associate with the right, being very religious, being, very patriotic, and, you know, almost blindly so. These
Uh-huh.
negative traits that we associate with the right were very prevalent, I feel, in all of society. I think that basically the left and the right were both further right in the past than they are now, um,
Hmm.
as ill-defined as all those terms are. But I think that what happened was, after World War II, we had the Red Scare, and we had McCarthy accusing people of being communist and getting laws passed to ban communists from jobs, and a lot of people that were just slightly leaning left were accused of communism and were persecuted for it. And basically,
Hmm.
what happened, I think, is you had a political ideology that had way too much power over society, and it was flexing that because it knew it was powerful, and it was punishing those that didn't agree with it, and
Hmm.
and that's what broke conservatism in the United States, was that when suddenly the McCarthy trials went too far and accused too many people, and too many people thought, well, basically, I think that accusing Eisenhower of being a communist broke McCarthy, because you know that that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone loved Eisenhower, I mean, for the most part, and suddenly, McCarthy's saying Eisenhower's a communist, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, well, if Eisenhower's a communist, then communism can't be that bad, and these trials are a pretty terrible idea. Like, we thought we were being patriotic and protecting the West and protecting capitalism and all of these great things, but obviously not, because obviously this has gone too far by accusing Eisenhower of being a communist, and so people backed away from that, and I think that this is kind of the far swing to the other side. Conservatism has lost a lot of power in politics, and the left has gained a lot of power over the last decades. And now it's basically the left's turn to have their version of the McCarthy trials. They have power and they're flexing it right now.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just kind of that idea of blowback. They get in power now, and they're gonna give them back a taste of
Yeah.
their own medicine. So
And,
was that during the presidential election? I heard that, but was that during the elections that McCarthy was calling Eisenhower a commie?
oh, I don't know precisely when it happened. I just know that it happened. I know that um, I know that Eisenhower was accused of being a communist, and that was pretty much the end of McCarthy.
Huh.
So I think that that's what's happened now is we've had 2015 roll by where everyone said, "Oh, it's 2015, current year," and then we had 2016 roll around, and basically, 2016 was the beginning. It was peak um, peak social justice, peak
Yeah.
cultural Marxism, and now it's breaking. We see this reaction as crude and as unwieldy as it is. I think Trump is an example of a rejection of the left.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I would, as much as, I mean, Trump has done a lot of things I don't agree with, but it almost kind of just, seeing the SJWs all riled up because of Trump, it almost kind of gives me some joy. But um, yeah, I definitely, I think the last few years as we've seen the left get a little more crazy than what I'm accustomed to or seeing them. But yeah, I guess it does seem to be, as you mentioned, that's probably as a result of McCarthyism and stuff.
So, the next thing to do is, I think that, I mean, I said it earlier, I think that Google has made this engineer into a martyr. He,
Yeah, Julian Assange offered him
a job? Sorry, you
yeah.
cut out there.
Oh, Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks guy, he offered him a job. I saw that on their WikiLeaks page.
Yeah, I don't think that James Damore is going to have any trouble getting a job
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
he's proved himself as being willing to question authority and say what he thinks is right, even at great personal cost.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just furthermore, what I've kind of seen most, I think what we see on the media with the left and the alt right and those kind of factions is quite extreme. But I think most reasonable people, they want to hear both sides of the conversation. So what James Damore said, I think, was resonated with me a lot because it seems to be a great need where people are interested in politics, but they kind of shy away from it just because of so much, feelings get hurt so much. But if people are willing just to talk openly and civilly with each other about political ideologies and ideas, I think most people would be able to come to a more rational conclusion. We wouldn't have such um, extreme reactions that we are seeing on the left and even on the far right now.
I think I want to believe that. I think that that most people are willing to speak with people that disagree with them and at least hear an argument. Um, I think that most people are like that. There are some ideologues that are intractable, and I think that there are too many of those that hold positions of power right now. But I think that in the long run, it'll shake itself out.
Yeah. Yep. Mhm.
So, anything else we want to say about the Google incident right now?
I think those are kind of my brief thoughts.
Okay. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing right now is the Streisand effect. Google saying, "Please don't look at this," and because of it, everyone has to look, and So turning James from some programmer who I guess like his job performance reviews say that he was a good programmer, but basically a no one. Like
Right, they
like
made
that's
him
harsh.
famous.
Yeah, I mean like a good programmer, but like not something that anyone is.
Yeah, and
I don't know any other Google programmers.
the thing that bothers me is even after they fire him, the media or just people that are out to get him, they're starting to pull up stuff like, "Oh, he's made a sexist joke back in like middle school," and they're trying to like really just make him look like a bad guy. Which is, come on, like he didn't even do anything wrong. If you don't agree with his views, and sure, Google does have the right to fire him if they want, but like going after his own personal life further, I think it's a little extreme for me. But
Yeah. So I think that it's basically Google wouldn't have had there would have been no attention except that Google overreacted to this.
yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
So we also wanted to talk about safety laws and immigration at some point, but I think that our more state-leaning people are not here in the live stream today.
They are not.
So I'm afraid that if we have this discussion today, it'll be me saying we don't need safety laws, and you saying we don't need safety laws, and then we're done.
Yeah, well, I guess my more would just be, when the market takes care of things such as roads and stuff, they would impose some type of regulation on privately run roads where, you do have to have licenses, you can't drunk drive on my roads and stuff like that. So I think naturally those kind of things would just come about in free society. But I guess that's just my view.
Okay, so I know that you're a full anarchist and you want no compulsory government at all, but for me, I'm not quite as ideologically pure as that. Um, yeah, I would actually be fine with a government that stuck to making roads and having a police department and a military. Like
See, if the government was just making roads that had a military and police department, I wouldn't be up in riles and I wouldn't just be like going, crazy and telling everyone, well, we need to get rid of this government right now. But they're not doing that. And I think it's just the more consistent view is if the market can provide a better service, why don't we keep privatizing it until there's no need for government involvement? So, I mean, I wouldn't be overly fussed if the government handled the roads, but I just see it as more ideologically consistent that they would be providing those services. And I think society could order itself um, very well with private law and with roads and stuff. I mean, it's very theoretical. It's not something that's been tested, but I think it definitely could work in theory.
oh well, I'll agree with you on that because um, I think that it's hard to come up with a consistent minarchist, a consistent non-arbitrary minarchist philosophy, because basically you have to say, oh well, the government is less effective than the free market at providing everything, but these are the things that we want the government to provide.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, do they get my trash too? And like, sure, like just for convenience, so I don't have to have someone just have them pick up my trash every Wednesday. And then where does it stop? What if people are like, well, then why can't we just have them run the post office too? I mean, it just could go on and on.
Yeah.
So that,
So
yeah.
no, I agree with you that anarchism is at least internally consistent, and I'll agree also that the free market would provide solutions to many of the problems that we suggest. However, I still don't feel like I can quite make that step to full anarchism. Um, but I think that a police force and a military, definitely we want those two things. Um, and then if they handled roads, if they had a fire department, like that might be fine as well. But there are lots of things that I would cut. I think the first thing that I would cut would be, um, well, man, that's hard now. I was gonna say the Department of Education, but now that I think about it, I think I'd take the Department of Agriculture. Um,
Oh, yeah, that's a hard one. If you only could pick one to cut, I don't know.
Maybe the
Maybe
Department of Energy.
Department of Energy.
There is one of
Criminal
those, right?
branch.
There is, yeah. I think is it Rick Perry? I don't know, but yeah, there's a lot of those. There's probably a department for everything you can think of. They Government grows and it doesn't stop growing, and that's my main issue of just being able to justify certain bureaucratic branches is, you cut off some and you say, oh, let's just keep it at this, but it's inevitably going to grow. That's just the nature of the state and having a monopoly over force, and yeah.
Yeah. How long has our temporary income tax gone on now?
When was is it
104 years.
1913? I think 1913 was when it was first implemented.
16th Amendment.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a temporary thing, and now we've had 4 generations of people that have lived and died under it, you know?
Right, right. What are your views, Stephanie? What do you think about the so-called safety laws? I know we kind of delved into theoretical anarchy, but
Kind of safety laws.
it, I don't know, whatever ones you had in mind.
When I first hear safety laws, the first thing I think of is seat belts, and honestly, I don't care if you want to drive without a seat belt. That has absolutely no effect on me whatsoever, unless you crash and come flying out of your car and your body happens to land on me. That's that's the only situation in which I would care if someone else wears a seatbelt.
So, I actually have lost friends over this argument.
Really?
Yeah, I've had people who have told me that please don't contact me anymore because I believe seatbelt laws are important, and because you think that they're not, I can no longer associate with you.
Yeah, I could see that. I think it's similar to we're advocating for drug decriminalization, and someone had a close one that died because the drug overdose. They could be very emotionally connected to that. So I could definitely see that reaction. It's a little extreme, but interesting.
Yeah. I'm not going to try and recreate the person's argument for seatbelts because I know that I wouldn't be able to do it justice. This is obviously something that is very important to them. But we talked about it for 2 or 3 days over Facebook, and at the end of it, the person unfriended me, sent me a message saying, please don't respond to me again.
Huh. Yeah, I guess...
This is a friend that, by the way...
Strongly about a piece of fabric.
This was a friend that I met when I was 11 or 12 years old, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd known this person for 17 years.
Wow. And so you guys were pretty good friends. You guys kept contact and stuff.
Yeah.
Huh. And just
over a piece of fabric with a buckle on it?
Yeah. She said that there was this accident that she had gotten into. It was her fault. She ran into someone else, and that she was just so glad that they all wore their seatbelts so that she didn't accidentally kill one of them. And I can understand that,
Yeah, I could totally understand that. And as I said, how I would see it, I think seatbelts are important. If it was that government didn't provide the service of roads and it was private companies, and I had an investment in roads, and I would want to ensure that I wouldn't be liable for things so I probably would make some regulations where seatbelts are required if you're under a certain age and things like that. And people, if they want to drive on the roads, in order to get a license to drive on the roads, they would have to, I guess, abide by those sort of regulations. So I would just see it as, yeah, I think those type of rules and stuff would generally still exist in society. It doesn't have to, but I think those things would come about in a free society without the government regulating it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about maybe food safety laws, since we seem to have talked out our seatbelt law thing. So, what are your thoughts about food safety?
Food safety. So that I mean, so you're referring to you have to get food handler's permit or just there's certain government agencies that would check up on restaurants, make sure they're keeping it some type of code. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, stuff like that, and all the way down to, having to get a business license and a food handler's permit to be able to open a lemonade stand.
Yeah, I guess my personal experience, I worked at a little restaurant in high school, and I mean they weren't the cleanest, but every time she would say, the boss would always say, this week the people that are going to inspect us are probably going to come, so just make sure we're extra clean this week. But then every other week, she's like, oh, I doubt it. They just recently can't. Like after they inspected, it's like, oh, it doesn't really matter, and you just kind of like let loose a little bit. Didn't really care as much. So to me, all these regulations on making sure food is safe and stuff. I mean, it's good intentions, good motives and stuff. We don't want people to get sick. We don't want there to be like outbreak of E. coli. But I really think that the free market would be able to equilibrize these problems. If restaurants aren't able to keep their kitchens clean and their food products clean, as soon as one customer gets sick, with the way that even how technology is now, I can just go post one really bad story on Yelp or Facebook and go tell everyone, don't eat at this restaurant. I saw one of the workers walk out of the bathroom, didn't wash their hands, and one of our kids recently got sick from eating the food products. I think that does a lot to damage the company already, or the restaurant, or whatever. So to me, it doesn't really seem like something. I mean, it's not necessary, and it really just ends up costing the businesses more to run because they have to get government permission to do these things. They have to check, and I mean, all these government workers that are taking care of these inspections and licenses as well are getting paid through tax dollars and other things. And so, I mean, the ramifications of it, I think, are more negative than positive, and I would see it as just something that isn't as great for society as a whole.
I don't have any like hardcore facts or scientific studies to back this up, but I think that at least what I've seen and in my own personal experience, when there is a certain standard that is set, won't do much to that standard. It's just barely enough to make it by, and there's no real incentive to do a lot better than that. And I mean, with no standard, like I'm sure there would be some places that wouldn't try to keep it clean, but like Justin said, like they wouldn't get much business because people would know that it's crazy unsanitary and just wouldn't go there anymore. But I feel like the part of the population that would just keep up on cleaning and sanitation and throwing out expired foods, because that's just how the business runs.
Yeah, that's how most reasonable do things. Also, like more than 10 years ago, I was in Hong Kong as well, just like visiting. I have family there and stuff, but I know they've tightened up a little bit on their street vendors and their licenses for food. But relative to Hong Kong is very open, their market for restaurants and food street vendors, etc. And the prices of food were so cheap back then. And yeah, you would see some really dirty stuff, but people like, if I don't get sick from the food, I don't care. I'm going to eat this because it's really cheap and it's really good. So in the same way that people, if they did get sick from it, they probably wouldn't go there again. That is a market signal, and that business would probably go out eventually. But as well, the lack of the regulations of government saying, well, there's these X, Y, and Z standards that I'm going to put in place, and you have to keep these, or we're going to shut you down. That does more to stifle people's business, and it makes food prices higher. And I think a lot of people are willing to, trade off a little bit of sanitary environment where it doesn't look as clean for cheaper food prices. And I think to me, that's a great trade-off if it's able to lower the price of food and etc. So
there is a taco stand that is in Provo that I really like, and every time I go in there, I'm like, the paint is bad. There's a hole in the wall over there, and like it looks very run down, but it has amazing tacos. And
yeah.
and I'm willing to risk it there because the tacos are pretty much the best street tacos I've had. I know it's not a street taco if it's in a restaurant, but it's that style of thing, you know.
Are you talking about the one by CVS
By what?
on by CVS Pharmacy on Bulldog?
No,
No, not that
not.
one.
That one is good.
That one's pretty good. That one's
Yeah.
inside too, but
I like
Yeah.
it. I've been there a few times. I'm talking about the one that's on 100 East and maybe like 200 north,
Oh,
300
okay.
north,
Okay. I think I know.
next to
I
the
know what
laser
you're
tag
talking about.
place.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people would hear this and be like, "Well, that's just what you prefer. What if we don't prefer to take that risk? We just want things to be clean, want to be set a certain standard." But I think the principle behind it is, I think we don't believe that government has a right to tell us what you can take into your body or tell you this is safe for you and this is not, because government is simply made of individuals just like us, just as many flaws, just as many mistakes, just as many logical errors and stuff. And it doesn't make sense to me that we can have the few impose a law upon many to force their agenda. So I think that's just the more principled stance behind it, is we don't want government in the business of regulating restaurants or cleanliness or what their standard of sanitary is and stuff.
Well,
But
yeah, and the thing is that a piece of paper doesn't make something clean, you know. So I have here, and I see these articles all the time. Like, every few months, I see about another lemonade stand that gets shut down by police, you know.
yeah,
And so here's one from July 21st. So that's not that long ago. It's what, maybe 3 weeks ago.
uh
And this 5-year-old was running a lemonade stand and gets fined $200 for not having a food handler's license and not having a business license. It's like,
man.
if you see a 5-year-old selling lemonade and you're worried that maybe your lemonade won't be sanitary if you buy from them, don't buy from them. You know,
If anything, I would just give the little 5 or 25 cents and not drink his lemon. A lot of times,
I know a guy who he refuses to eat food that's prepared by. Okay, so like he's LDS as well, and he refuses to eat food at ward activities. You know, like
because they're not.
if they're having a ward party, or you know, like a Christmas party, or
Man.
a potluck of some sort, he refuses to eat the food. He'll bring food, but he won't eat it because
It's not licensed. They don't have food handlers permits.
Oh, I don't think he's as uptight about that. He said that it's because he doesn't want to get sick from anyone else's food. Like, he'll eat stuff he makes, but he won't eat stuff that random other people in the congregation make because he doesn't want to get sick from it. And I know, you know, when he sees a lemonade stand on the road, he goes up to it and he gives them $1 and says, "No, I don't want any of the lemonade." Because
right.
he's afraid that it won't be sanitary and he'll get sick from it. Apparently, he and his wife had a really bad experience early on in their marriage, eating someone else's food and getting super sick off of it, and so they just decided that they'd never do it again.
Well, yeah, I think that's just a great example of choosing where to. I guess, I mean, he helps them out, but he chooses to use their products or whatever they're producing. And I think the same argument could be made when people say, well, we should have these kind of standards imposed upon businesses because we all want to be safe and clean. But people can just choose not to eat at those places if they think it's really that dirty, or yeah, if it has given people problems in the past. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So we have immigration and welfare on the docket, but I feel like saving that for next week's podcast.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. It was
okay. Do we have something else that we want to add so we can have 2 more topics to talk about next week?
I don't think we're going to fit 4 in 1 week.
No, I mean, we have immigration and welfare as one topic, and we want another topic, so we have 2.
Right. I guess the immigration state and welfare state are synonymous. Like, it's the same argument that goes into it. It depends who's on next week. If Trevor wants animal rights, then we could do that. But
Yeah, I guess we could. I guess we'll talk about it off camera then.
okay, sounds good.
But yeah, so next week on the podcast we'll have immigration and welfare and something else. So this is our
Stay
YouTube
tuned.
channel. Yeah, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you get notifications when we're live streaming. And ask questions in the chat. Send emails to our email address, which is in the description below. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, and you can also like our Facebook page.
Oh yeah, we have a Facebook page now. So
it is. It's
go like the Facebook
BYU
page.
Free Market Society. You can look that up, and we should post updates on there of any events happening at BYU, and as well videos that we post. So look for that.
Great. Well, see you all, YouTube land. Bye.
All right.
Bye.